Of the 7 forms of lightsaber combat, none commanded nearly as much mystique as Form 7. The youngest of the classical forms, many Jedi considered Form 7 dangerous, and for good reason. This form led its users perilously close to the dark side, especially its Vapad variant, a technique invented by Mace Windu. Form 7 was also one of the most complex forms, especially in a philosophical sense. In other words, it's perfect for the finale of our series on the philosophy of lightsaber combat.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The original Form 7 variant, Juyo, came about in the centuries before the Old Sith Wars, likely between 5000 and 4000 BBY. It was a form unlike any other practiced by the Jedi, an overwhelmingly aggressive and chaotic form. Its practitioners surrendered themselves to the currents of the Force as they were churned up by battle, letting the energy of the fight flow through them and guide their actions. This made Juyo rather difficult. Indeed, most Jedi considered it the most difficult to master of all the 7 forms. It also made Juyo dangerous. Millennia after the creation of Juyo, Mace Windu, with assistance from fellow Jedi Master and Juyo stylist Sora Bulk, formulated another Form 7 variant. This style, Vapad, was named after a vicious and extraordinarily agile predator from the moons of Sarapin. Vapad was even more chaotic than Juyo and much more dangerous, as Vapad drew on the duelists' darker emotions, bringing them close to the dark side. To quote the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Vapad is as aggressive and powerful as its namesake, but its power comes at great risk. Immersion in Vapad opens the gates that restrain one's inner darkness. To use Vapad, a Jedi must allow himself to enjoy the fight. He must give himself over to the thrill of battle, the rush of winning. Vapad is a path that leads through the penumbra of the dark side. Because of this danger and the difficulty in mastering both forms, Form 7 was rare among the Jedi. During the Old Sith Wars, only the greatest of Jedi Masters knew Juyo. It became a bit more popular in the later New Sith Wars, but this ultimately led to disaster, as the rush of Juyo drew many of the Jedi fighting in the war to the dark side. After the end of the New Sith Wars, Juyo became a restricted technique, taught only to a handful of students who were personally selected by the Jedi Battlemaster. Vapad, when it was developed, was mastered only by Mace Windu and taught to only Sora Bulk and Depa Billaba. Vapad ended up being too much for either Jedi to handle. It drew both Bulk and Billaba to the dark side during the Clone Wars, much as Juyo had done to its users during the New Sith Wars. This trend was apparent in Form 7 from very early on, when Juyo's most well-known Old Sith Wars era master, the Jedi historian Atris, was also consumed by the dark side.
Perhaps one of the greatest styles, learned only by the most skilled of Force wielders. Impressive. In many ways, some have described it as a surrender to the Force and to chaos, to strike at an opponent with such speed and angles of attack that they have difficulty countering it. Your number of attacks will increase, and you will notice many more of them shall slip beneath an opponent's guard, critically wounding them. But in surrendering yourself to the Force in such a way reduces your ability to resist its effects should the enemy turn the Force against you. Be on your guard.
Form 7 was also known as the Ferocity Form and the Way of the Vornskir, the latter referring to a hound-like predator that hunted using the Force. Its blade work bore a vague resemblance to Shi Cho, involving lots of broad, sweeping strokes. However, while Shi Cho was rigid and simplistic, Form 7 was chaos, dominated by quick, aggressive strikes and what Battlemaster Sindralig called seemingly unconnected staccato sequences. Its erratic nature made it unpredictable and devastating in combat. But like all lightsaber forms, Form 7 wasn't just a set of maneuvers and tricks, it was a philosophy, a mindset. This was more true for Form 7 than for any other form. The Juyo variant of Form 7 was a little more refined than Vapad. Its power was drawn from the flow of battle, from the Force in its wildest and most dangerous state. Much like Surisu, true Juyo required the practitioner to open themselves up to the Force. But while Surisu was decidedly rooted in light side techniques, Juyo opened the user up to the Force in whatever form it assumed. In battle, combatants poured all sorts of wild and unpredictable emotions into the Force and altered the shape of the Force in the moment, causing it to change to reflect the frenzy of battle. While other lightsaber forms shut this chaos out, Juyo absorbed it. Vapad was a bit more personal. It drew on the duelists' personal dark side, feeding on their barely controlled passion and the thrill of battle, which was usually forbidden by the Jedi Code. It also drew on opponents' emotions, drawing in their strength and turning it against them. Vapad granted its users even more power and unpredictability than Juyo, though this came at the cost of straying even closer to the dark side. Additionally, Vapad weaponized the Force itself. While Juyo exploited how battle could warp the Force, Vapad deliberately created this effect, allowing the duelist to draw power from it. To again quote the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Windu and Palpatine's blades flashed and flared, crashing together with bursts of fire, weaving nets of killing energy in exchanges so fast Anakin could not truly see them, but he could feel them in the Force. The Force itself roiled and burst and crashed around them, boiling with power and lightspeed ricochets of lethal intent. And it was darkening. Anakin could feel how the Force fed upon Palpatine's murderous exaltation. He could feel fury spray into the Force as though some poisonous abscess had crested in both their hearts. There was no Jedi restraint here. Mace Windu was cutting loose. As Form 7 came close to the dark side too often, it's worth asking why the Jedi tolerated it in the first place. Vapad in particular violated the Jedi Code, allowing passion to guide its users' actions. However, the Jedi allowed it because, even though it violated the code and stepped close to the dark side, it wasn't inherently a dark side technique. Juyo could be used as a dark side combat style, and many Darksiders did indeed favor it, Darth Maul among them, but one couldn't elevate Vapad to its highest form by drawing on the dark side, though Sora Bulk's dark side perversion of the form came pretty close to matching Windu's style. This is because, to quote Revenge of the Sith one last time, Vapad was a channel for darkness, and that darkness flowed both ways. Windu accepted the furious speed of the Sith Lord, drew the Shadow's rage and power into his innermost center, and let it fountain out again. He reflected the fury upon its source as a lightsaber redirects a blaster bolt. He was not afraid. The darkness had no power over him, but neither did he have power over it. Vapad made him an open channel, half of a superconducting loop completed by the Shadow. It was a state of mind, a channel for darkness. Power passed into him and out again without him touching it. If you're particularly attentive, you might have noticed that this description has strong parallels to the novelization's earlier descriptions of using the light side. Lightsiders open themselves up to the Force, letting it flow through them and direct their actions without interference from their conscious will, in contrast to Darksiders who tried to seize control of the Force and impose their own will upon it. Vapad users treated the darkness put out by their opponents as they would the light side, turning their enemy's own darkness against them, all without allowing themselves to actually touch the darkness. This was an extraordinarily difficult balance to maintain. When Jedi opened themselves to the rush of battle, as Vapad required, they were often tempted to draw on the darkness flowing from their opponents instead of redirecting it back at them. It was this temptation that drew Sora Bulk, the style's co-creator, to the dark side during the Clone Wars. By drawing on an opponent's power in this way, Bulk claimed he had perfected Vapad. In reality, he had lost what made the form so effective, which ultimately led to his defeat. This wraps up our series on the 7 forms of lightsaber combat. If you've been watching from the start, congratulations on making it through. Now that you're more familiar with the 7 forms, which of them is your favorite? If you were a Jedi, which one would you use? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video, or series, or whatever we decide to do next.